Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be from LMU at LMU, but those are different LMUs, Loyola Marymount. The first one is a Jesuit LMU. This one is not yet Jesuit. You know it better. Indeed, it has been said in this conference many times about the instrumentalization of religion, of the churches, how the churches are frustrating when it comes to their reactions to the war, and how they've contributed to the war. Well, I should acknowledge that I was probably among the earliest who started speaking about the instrumentalization of the church and religion. And I'm not happy myself about the word instrumentalization, because instrumentalization implies some kind of passivity, lack of agency. When something is instrumentalized, it's just something. Instrument has no soul or mind or will, while the churches, they do, well, collectively speaking. Therefore, we need to make some reservations when we use the term instrumentalization of the churches, because the churches are active actors. They have agency when it comes to the war. And those agencies vary. There are the churches that are very active in supporting the war, like the Russian Orthodox Church, which is a protagonist of the war. I sometimes say that if you compare the situation with like fascist Italy or Nazi Germany, the churches collaborated with the regimes, but they were like the last wagon in the train, when the leading role was played by the party, the fascist party or the Nazi party, in Germany or Italy. In Russia, the church is the locomotive, and the rest are, the train, the wagons of the train. But what about other churches? Some local Orthodox churches are rather passive supporters of the war. Their passive support to the war, however, does not mean that they lack agency. It is their choice. That's what they've chosen to be, passive supporters to the war. And even the churches that are against the war, sometimes they have their own reasons to be against the war, which are not exactly compatible, which do not necessarily stem from Christian ethics. Well, in my ecclesiology, I developed my own kind of strange ecclesiology. And in this ecclesiology, I usually differentiate between two things: the nature and the structures of the church. And I believe there are some basic things which belong to the nature of the church that the church is supposed to uphold, and it doesn't sometimes, while the church has developed structures in order to uphold the natures, but sometimes those structures evolve into self-sufficient values. They become like the most important things for the church. Like, for example, I don't know, our church administration sometimes is more important than the church per se. And this is an example when the structures become more important than the nature that they are supposed to serve, it causes crisis within the churches. I believe those crises have been kind of highlighted by this war, because we see how the churches serve more their structures than their nature. And for this reason, they either actively or passively support the war. In Russia, for example, the Russian church, the patriarchate is the most important structure. And, well, the Patriarch of Moscow is like Louis the 14th, état émoin. Well, he believes that he is the church. Therefore, whatever serves him personally serves the Russian Orthodox Church. And that's how it comes that, everyone needs to follow what he says. And this is and this betrays like the nature of the church. The recent episode happened just yesterday, when there was a gathering of the priests. Probably you heard of it. And one priest was bold enough to say that I am not for patriotism. I believe that the church needs to lead people to the kingdom of God. And the patriarch told to him, "I've never heard this. Probably you are from the Western Ukraine. Go and think what you've just said." It was like, the denial of the nature of the church, because what the priest said was exactly the proclamation of the nature of the church, what the church is supposed to be. And what the patriarch said was the proclamation of the ultimate importance of the structures of the church. this applies not just to the churches. This confusion between the nature and the structures, I believe, it applies even to some, international organizations and platforms that are supposed, by design, to serve peace and reconciliation. Take the UN. We told today about the Red Cross. Take the WCC, World Council of Churches. They were designed to serve Christian unity, peace and reconciliation, and they don't. To some extent. Well, it seems to many, at least, that they serve more their own ends, their own structures. The structures are enormous, now are huge, those kind of apparati, bureaucratic apparati, and they need to kind of help those apparatuses to flourish at the expense of the purposes of those organizations. That's why we have the crisis in the UN, for example. We have the crisis in the WCC, when the process is more important than the end. When people are so much, focused on the process, on the procedures, on the protocols, than on the original rationale of those organizations. So that's how my ecclesiology, maybe faulty ecclesiology, I think is applicable to explain why big international organization platforms fail sometimes. So these are the examples how the churches, international organizations, and platforms have been hijacked by the perpetrators of the war. And there are many discussions about those, how this happened, how the Russians managed to instrumentalize many things and organizations and institutions, including the churches. But those are like rough instrumentalizations. I'd like to bring us to more subtle instrumentalizations, which are not so obvious, but they are important. There are some, I believe, abusive instrumentalizations or some abuses that become instrumentalized, that contribute to the war. They contribute to the mosaic of the war. We've discussed in this conference already post-truth. What is post-truth? I believe post-truth is an abuse of, generally speaking, good principle: be yourself. Do what you deem is important to do. It's important, to be ourselves, to follow our feelings, to follow our beliefs. But this is also, in the abusive form, it is a source of post-truth, and it has become instrumentalized. Post-truth is very much, if you take Tucker Carlson, who is a prophet of post-truth, he's exactly doing this. Take another thing, which has been instrumentalized and important in this war: conspiracy theories. Which feed the war with the narratives, which feed the war with resentment. What is conspiracy theory but not a sort of abuse of critical thinking? Critical thinking is important in academia. It's the foundation of academia. And yet when it is abused, when it is used not in an educated way, when it is based on kind of rejection of education, it becomes conspiracy theory. When people don't trust the evidence, people don't trust what they see. That is exactly the conspiracy theory. They tell us, what is right, but we don't see it this way. We have this critical approach. This is an outcome of the critical thinking in its abusive form, and it has been instrumentalized. Another thing, subtle thing, that has been instrumentalized, and which is important, which also stems from academia, by the way, and there are some scholars who study this phenomenon, it's post-secularism, post-secularity. This term was coined by Jürgen Habermas, and it has become a very important term in kind of understanding what is going on in Europe, especially after 9/11. Well, he coined actually this term a few weeks after 9/11 happened, and being a very convinced secularist himself, he suggested that religion and society need to engage with one another in the spirit of his communicative action theory. And he suggested that secularity needs kind of to bring religion and society together into the dialogue. And then there is an abusive form of secularism, which is, commonly speaking, it's healthy. But when it comes to Russia, for example, it is clearly an abuse of post-secularism. It is an instrumentalization of post-secularism, weaponization of post-secularism in Russia. Christina knows it much better than me, how it works. I observe the same now, the instrumentalization of post-secularity in the United States, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Habermas coined, well, I've also already mentioned that the Habermas's theory of communicative action, that actually everyone and all the actors in the society that feel like alienated from each other, they have like, in conflict with one another, need to engage through the dialogue with one another. This is the way to overcome differences and divisions within the modern society, which is a beautiful theory indeed. But even that theory has been hijacked by the Russians, the same Russians. Essentially what the Russians say and what they did, they suggested like, engage with us, talk to us, have a dialogue with us, while we will be doing our butchery thing. And this is the way how they actually managed to paralyze a good chunk of the German intellectual circles, societies. People have been almost like, really paralyzed by this. We can't do anything to Russia. We need to engage with them, in the dialogue. And the Russians knew this and they used it. It is an instrumentalization of a very good thing, which is communicative action, the dialogue. That's the way how they instrumentalized also other dialogue-related things, like ecumenical dialogue. Ecumenism has become an instrument and a victim of a similar weaponization and instrumentalization. Also, even the idea of religious freedom has become a weapon in the Russian hands. On the one hand, they destroy, religion, everything which is not the Russian Orthodox Church on the territories that they have occupied. They kill priests, they expel people, communities, they destroy communities. On the one hand. On the other hand, they bring accusations against others of doing the same thing. That is the very popular accusation that Ukraine violates, fights religion, violates religious freedom. It's not that we are blameless. We do many mistakes in Ukraine, but not certainly the same mistakes that the Russians do. But they say that we are the main perpetrators of against religious freedom, which is a playbook of Russian propaganda. Accuse others of what you are doing yourself, and this is the best smokescreen for what you are doing. Finally, the abusive instrumentalization of ethics. The Russians claim that they started this war in order to save the world from itself, from the decadence. It was very similar. It reminded me, actually, when I started studying this rationalization of the war by the Russians, it reminded me of what happened in Germany before the World War I. Probably not many people know because somehow the World War II overshadowed, the World War I. But the World War I was very much messianic, at least for many Germans. They believe that they have a mission to save the world, especially Europe, from itself, from the French decadence, from the corruption of mores, of morality, and they have this mission from God to be a hammer of God, to destroy the enemies of God in Europe. That's exactly what the Russians say. They say that Europe has collapsed, morally speaking. Through relativism, through destroying traditional values, through going against the traditional values, and the Russians raised this banner of morality, of ethics, to fight for their family values and so forth. And what is the result? That the result is the institution of family in Ukraine has been destroyed. We have millions of families which are separated now, with wives and kids are in Germany and elsewhere in Europe, husbands fighting or hiding in Ukraine, meaning the families are dysfunctional and they don't exist. Normal families, healthy families are really exceptions in Ukraine. That is the result of the policy, Russian rhetoric of protecting family, the complete destruction of family. They say we are for human life against abortion and everything else. And they destroy human life in masses. Something similar I observed just last week when I was in DC, I had a chance to participate in several events going on in DC. Well, the most important of them was the National Prayer Breakfast with Trump addressing the public there, but there was also an International Religious Freedom Summit, another big event, where Vice President Vance attended and delivered a patristic speech. And there was a Ukrainian week, by the way, a very important event as well. What I observed there was a lot of religious enthusiasm everywhere in the corridors, from the scene, emanated from the scene. Religion was very thick there, everywhere. I would say that this religious covered the entire Capitol Hill, the entire National Mall in DC. Everyone spoke religion. And what I observed as a result, under this thick carpet of religion, some very important things have become buried, essentially, like ethics. Ethics has become relativized. It is like gone and has been substituted by things like social Darwinism. That is the new religion nowadays, which is covered up and justified by religion, by religious rhetoric. This is really worrying, and I believe that we need to be really concerned about this. I came up after these meetings, in DC, with an idea. I'm finishing, with this idea that what we should need to do, we need to make ethics great again. It is important still. Oh, that's unimaginable. Just over several weeks or so, ethics, as from a universal category, has become really relativized, has become optional, has become a part of this post-truth. If you choose to be ethical, okay, but it's not necessarily, it's not mandatory anymore. So social Darwinism now matters. And this is something which is now a new context for the Ukrainian issue, for the Ukraine situation. All the proposals that have been made during the last days, they are based not on the principles of ethics. They're based on the principles of social Darwinism, essentially. I have many friends in the United States who are more, including Republican friends. And I observe an interesting phenomenon of being hypnotized and being paralyzed like rabbits by a snake, by a cobra. All of a sudden, all their beliefs, everything that was important for them, like morality, ethics, have become relativized, have become optional. They yielded to this evil gravitas, this black hole, which has emerged in the world and has kind of distorted the gravitational field of the world. It works in a very strange way. On the one hand, yes, there are the followers, blind followers that want to be yielded, want to follow this gravitational field, to be consumed eventually by this black hole. But there are people who are against in principle, but are not against some outcomes of this new gravitational field. What I mean, I'll explain you. People are tired of the war. I think Max Weber was the first one who described the phenomenon of routinization of the war. He explained it in connection with the routinization of charisma. He essentially said that two things change the social canopy or the social fabric: prophecy, charisma, and sword or death or violence. And eventually, both things that disturb, the surface, the social surface, they tend to become routinized. We eventually get accustomed to the war. I'm very grateful to the remark of Father Christian, who said that don't watch, movies and images from Ukraine, because nothing else contributes to the routinization of the war as the flood of images. And the war in Ukraine has been documented better than any other war in the world history. We are updated, if we want to, about what is going in the field the moment it is happening. We are better informed here about the war in Ukraine than people in the field, actually, in the battlefield in Ukraine, because we have all those, torrents and streams of images. So this is one of the main kind of things that contribute to the routinization of the war. The war has been routinized, and this routinization has different effects on different audiences. Like it is different, this routinization different in Europe or in Germany than in Ukraine or in Russia. But all those three kind of big parts of the war have been routinized in its own way. And people are tired, as we are tired of the war. And they need excuses to avert their side from the war. They want to, sometimes I feel if you watch this movie, Gladiator 1 and 2, it's a good example. It's like, it's a fight between the gladiators. We are the gladiators on the scene, in the arena. And there are, observers on the benches out there. Both are tired because this fight is happening now for 3 years. We are tired to fight, but those who observe us also tired to do so. And they want to go elsewhere. We want to go elsewhere, but we can't, because if we go, we get killed. And people need excuses to avert their sides. Essentially, what Trump has done, he has offered people an excuse to avert their side from the war. It's our choice whether we follow this enticement, this temptation, Trump temptation, or we resist it. My appeal is to resist it. Thank you.